Now we would like to welcome our first speaker, a climate justice activist who would be discussing climate change, Colas van Moorsel.
I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in my kitchen in Brussels with my best friend, and I had just watched a conference. A day which could have been like any other. Turns out to be the day I had been looking away from the climate crisis for too long. After this day, my life changed, and I realized I had a responsibility to do something. I will come back to that story in a moment, if you will allow me. To start this talk, I first need to clarify what climate change is and where does it come from. In fact, even if it's the biggest challenge humanity has ever faced, it is quite simple to understand where it comes from. My goal here today is not to sound like an expert or someone who comes here trying to lecture you, although it is important to me that you understand that this is not my opinion. This is just fact about the future of humankind. I'm just a young man who one day woke up and decided to say, I don't want to be part of the problem anymore. I want to be part of the solution. So you have all heard about the greenhouse effect, the CO2 we emit, that flying or buying crap from the other sides of the world is not good, right? I mean, I hope so. By existing, purely existing, we emit fossil fuel, such as coal, oil, and gas, every day into the atmosphere. They trap the heat of the sun that will stay there for hundreds of years to come, causing the warming up of the earth. We are not all monsters, but it is all the things I mentioned before that are causing the warming up of the earth in extremely dangerous ways. Okay, but what does that mean? The climate crisis is just the consequence of a system that is built on exploitation. It has been confirmed for decades by science. Humans are the cause. The economic system as we know it always wants more and more growth in a world with limits. So you see the problem coming here. If we acknowledge it, we are living in a fossil fuel addicted society based on intensive agriculture, meat production, and polluting industries. We also have to acknowledge that we will have to change the entire system instead of just looking through policies that look at what the core of the problem is. And the problem is global inequality, leading to climate injustice. To understand what climate justice is, we need to understand how we got here in the first place. So a lot of the success of the global north has come at the expense of the global south. To give you an example, in 2018, only 2% of the global world population has flown internationally. So although everyone here may think it's the most normal thing on earth to fly for the beach in Spain for the weekend, this privilege only belongs to 1% of our society, the most privileged amongst us. And how did we get to that major inequality? Because the Western world has built its success on the lives of the rest of the world by modern slavery, exploitation, and colonization. And by doing that, we cause the climate crisis, emitting billions of tons of CO2 every single year into the atmosphere to keep up this luxury and ignoring lifestyle. So take a look at those two maps. So first, we see how the world looks like, geographically. And then we see which continent are the big emitters. As we can clearly see, the global north consume and emit much more than the global south. But it becomes even worse because there is not just inequality in who is the cause of this crisis. It is also the people that are the least responsible that are facing the biggest consequences. So basically, you can't get the climate crisis without the Industrial Revolution. You can't get the Industrial Revolution without oil and gas. And you can't get oil and gas without colonialism and slavery. So let's keep going with some facts, because we don't always realize the scale at which this is happening and how serious this is. If politicians would follow their current policies they proposed at COP26, we would still go toward of 2.7 degrees of global warming, which would be catastrophic. Children born today are up to 7 times more likely to face extreme weather events than their grandparents. A rise of 2.7 degrees will affect everyone. Even wealthy cities and rich countries wouldn't be immune to the consequences. Let's do an exercise. Because a big part of us sometimes rationally understand these things, but we don't feel them. So could you all close your eyes for 2 minutes? So close your eyes and imagine a room at your house. A place that you like, where you feel good, where you like to sit or stay when you need to relax and rest. Can you see that room? Try to visualize the room with every detail. Imagine the sofa you're in, or the table you're seated at, the music that runs, or maybe the smell. You can be alone or with other people. Now imagine all the memories that you made there, all the things that this room reminds you of. Family, friend, work, hobbies, all the things that make you who you are. And now that you see all of this, I want you to imagine that in a second, you need to leave everything, your favorite place, your house, and all your goods, because there is a huge flood, storm, or drought that made it impossible for you to live there. Now you may open your eyes again. I want you to remember that this is the case for around 20 million climate refugees every single year. Now, let me help you with something I did wrong at the beginning of my activism. I was blaming myself for not knowing about these problems. And I was asking myself, why didn't I do anything before? But don't blame yourself too much, because research shows that only 1 to 2% of media attention is targeted around climate change. So it's not a joke, the biggest threat humanity has ever faced, and almost no media or schools talks about it. Don't blame yourself too much, because huge multinational and lobby industries have been spending billions of dollars every year for many years to cause doubt about the danger of climate change. Social media is made to take us far away from reality and to make us see what we want to see. Don't get me wrong, social media has also good sides, but we need to be aware of the algorithm and the fake news. So to recap, climate change is just the consequence of the society of the Western world. And if there is one thing I've learned since the beginning of my activism, is that we are always dealing with this problem as if it was all set in stone, that our democratic system could never change. But I would like you to remember one thing that is very important to me. It is not just because a model has been existing for years, or even centuries, that it necessarily needs to exist in that way in the future. And there I come to a very important point of my presentation. New narrative. We are society. Our way of thinking is what creates everything around us. Our political system and our so-called democracy. If we dream together of a better world, we have already taken the first step towards it. We can take the example of the women voting rights, which once were unthinkable and now, luckily, implemented in many countries. The most powerful engine for the mobilization and the cooperation of millions of people is the realization of people themselves that we are the engine. So, what can you do? Okay, I'm there in my kitchen, you remember? And then I look at my friend and I say to him, this young girl, she's 19, it was Adelaide Charlier, and she's doing all those things, and I'm doing nothing. I want to do something too. And then you look at me and you reply to me, Kola, you say that a lot. And then after a few days, life goes on, the parties, the student life, and then nothing. And there, I probably took the best decision without even knowing at that moment. I took the first small step. And I made a promise to myself. First, I decided to go a month vegetarian. Second, I went on a strike. And I decided to meet young people who were able to pull me up in this direction. And third, I joined a youth movement. And I choose Youth for Climate, or Friday for Future Belgium. So we are the youth who organized the big climate strike in Brussels for weeks on end. We put pressure on politicians and businesses. We raise awareness, especially among young people, via social media, conferences, or visits in school. And I think what brings me hope and courage are the incredible and inspiring young people I'm surrounded with from everywhere on this planet. Okay, so that was how I got involved. Now, what about you? The biggest realization I had to start my activism with is when I became aware of my privilege, which brought me to my two responsibilities, as I like to call them. So first, see it as your individual responsibility. This is literally all the individual action you can do. Eating vegetarian or vegan, transport, shopping, clothes, plus your job. What you are good at and what you can do to help the wider cause, which is super important and what we need. But it is quite often where people stop and think they have done their part. For the most engaged people today, I mean, which is still sadly a small minority. And then see it as your citizen responsibility. This is more about your voice, who you vote for, but also how you think. And you can ask yourself those questions. Do I talk about climate change? Do I inform myself? Am I in denial? Am I talking about intersectionality, gender and racial equality, or human rights? This is very important and often forgotten. As I was saying before, what we really need is a system change. And for me, the fastest way to do this is to change the way we think our society. From how I see it, society is made out of a triangle, consisting of civil society, industry, and politics. If you want a system to change, we need those three to change. They are dependent and they influence each other. This is why Youth for Climate has put together over 100 scientists to make a climate action plan, specifically for Belgian policy. We have given this plan to all party leaders since May 2019, and almost nothing has happened. So clearly the problem is not a lack of solution, it's a lack of political courage. Our politicians have a duty to protect us, but they seem to have forgotten it. So we come on the street because we need to remind them. They are not taking responsibility. They are gambling with our future and the present of millions of people around the world. For me, the best thing you can do is do something you love, where you can spend hours doing it and apply it to the cause, to something bigger than you. I would very much like you to leave this room with an idea. Because sometimes you get caught up in a meeting, a documentary, or a conference. And you are taken by this feeling of anger and hope that shakes you for a few hours, a few days sometimes, and then nothing. Exactly what I felt before. I felt powerless in front of all that. And then the daily rhythm, the pressure of school and work life, a certain discouragement, which brings you back to your reality. What I would like to ask you is to think of one thing. It may sound ridiculous. Keep it there for yourself. One thing that you want to do to help to create this new narrative, or to participate to this huge movement going on. Think about it super hard and get it done as soon as you can. Swear it to yourself as an oath, here and now, that one day, when you're ready, you will make that promise. Exactly like I did in my kitchen, and look at where I am now. You can write it down or keep it in your head, but make that promise to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Kola.